Okay, if everyone can start moving towards their seat, please.
Okay, so you understand.
Yeah, yes.
Good afternoon. Our next speaker is a renowned linguist and Turkologist whose work spans nearly 6 decades. So it will be nearly impossible to sum it up in a short introduction, but I'll try. Originally from Istanbul, Turkey, Marcel Erdal is a graduate of Robert College in Istanbul. He went on to study linguistics in Jerusalem with Hans-Jakob Polatsky, then Turkic and Altaic studies in Copenhagen with Karl Hansen. He was the head of the Turkology department at Goethe University, Frankfurt am Main, from 1993 to 2010. More recently, he has taught in Nicosia, Cyprus, at the Central Minorities University in Beijing, China, and at Hacettepe University in Ankara, Turkey. Over the years, Professor Erdal has collaborated with many other illustrious leaders in the field, including Louis Bazin, Gerard Dorfer, Lars Johansen Mainz, and Klaus Schoenig. Marcel is an honorary member of the Turkish Language Institution, supervising committee of Turfenforschung at the Berlin Brandenburg Academy of Sciences. Some of his more famous publications include the Old Turkic word formation, a functional approach to the lexicon, published in 1991, and a grammar of Old Turkic, published in 2004. He has published extensively on Turkish morphology and been engaged in field work on endangered South Siberian Turkic varieties, and is currently a contributing editor to the Handbook of CeLCAR. Today, he will be discussing the phenomenon of linguistics divergence and convergence among the 40-some Turkic languages spoken throughout Western Europe and Central Asia, in his talk entitled, "How Did the Turkic Languages Come to Differ as They Do?" As the conference coordinator, I can tell you for certain that there are many in the audience today who are very excited to see this talk, and so it is my pleasure to introduce Professor Marcel Erdal.
Thank you very, very much for this very flattering introduction. I have chosen this topic, how did the Turkic languages come to differ as they do. This is a very, very ambitious topic about which one could write a whole book. As there are, as you just said, 40 languages, the task is not all that terribly difficult, because first of all, the syntax of the syntactic structure of the Turkic languages is quite similar, and as some of you must have noticed, Turkic languages have relatively few exceptions. They don't have verb classes, they don't have noun classes. So actually, I do believe that it is feasible if you have since you have regular sound laws, and given a limited number of natural morphological processes and actually known paths of grammaticalization of verbs, which became auxiliaries and so on, and if you reconstruct a proto-language, then I really hope, and I think that I'm planning to derive, not right now, but I'm working on it, to derive the grammar of all 40 languages from that one proto-language. I mean, it's not all that terrible, because as I said, not only are the languages relatively regular, but in fact they have not changed so much. The earliest stage of the language is Oghuz and Kipchak, the text of the inscriptions, and the grammar is not all that different. There are certain sound laws, as I said. I just want to give, start giving examples from the lecture which we just heard. The lady mentioned two terms. One is Jai Lao as summer pasture, and the other one was Kistau, winter pasture. Now, these words correspond to Turkish yayla and kışla. Now, Turkish yayla is not transparent because you don't have the word yay, but in fact, if you look at Old Turkic, if you look at other languages, you will see that yaz is spring in those languages and yay is summer. So you can compare it based on these words and see that Turkish Y corresponds to Kazakh J in word onset, and that is in fact the case with many, many other Turkic languages. Turkic languages are divided by perhaps about half which have Y in the onset, and another part which have J in the onset, or Ch in the onset, or J in the onset, and these are regular laws. Always Kazakh J will correspond to Turkish Y in the onset. The W in Jai Lao in the end is regular sound laws. Turkish lost all the G's, all G's in general. I mean, all the G's which you have in Turkish come from K, whereas Kipchak languages, of which Kazakh is one of them, changed the G, the G, to W in some cases, and as in the word sarı, which was also mentioned, dropped them, and the regular rules for that. Now, kıstau can also be explained. The Kazakhs changed all the sh to S for some reason, so kış becomes kıs. This is one feature which exists in Kazakh. So, in fact, and the Turks, as I said, in kışla, dropped all the G's, so kışlag became kışla. So, this is just one example of how one can, by regular laws, take any words and transfer them to the language. This thing works in. It really works because Turkish languages are pretty regular. So what one needs is really to have all these sound laws and morphological laws for deriving things. Now, again, in the lecture before that, there was this discussion about infixes. Now, I'm just, before I start, I'm just giving this general sort of connection. Geliyor, the last syllable comes from the verb yürümek, to walk. And Turkic languages in general, and also Kazakh, which is, you could see it here on the screen, has four verbs. One is jörü, one is otur, one is jat, and one is tur, which are used in Turkic languages in general, including Siberian languages, Yakut, Chuvash, any language are used for expressing, also Uyghur, for example, for expressing durativity. So Turkish, as all the other Oghuz languages, chose the verb to walk, whereas the Siberian languages, but also Uyghur and Uzbek chose the verb yat, to lie, because if you lie down, I mean you're lying, it takes some time. So you can divide again the Turkic languages by which auxiliary they mainly use. Turkish made yürü into this function. Of course, durmak also was used at a later stage with a similar function, but yürü was the first one, and so it became a suffix, the present tense suffix. Whereas, for example, again, yat became cha, and in Khakas you have cha as the present tense suffix from the verb yat. And so you see that you can have these four verbs to actually to give us an example for the renewal of the present, but also actionality of continuation in all Turkic languages without an exception. Now, you know gel, you know now you know yor, which comes from yorulmak. And then what is the e in the middle? That is the converb vowel. It was geleyor actually originally, and then it became geliyor because there's a rule that a low vowel plus y gives high vowel plus y, and so it became geliyor. But there is geleyor in Armenian dialects, for example. So just to I mean, this is the converb vowel, a converb which, like kosha kosha, which was used with auxiliaries. Now, your question to that presentation was there is gelemin, kelemin. How come that the pronoun is added there? In fact, that's because you had all these auxiliaries, and then there was a development where they took away the auxiliaries in many Kipchak languages and just were left with the converb form and the pronoun. This is just to connect with what happened to be in the last lectures. We heard lectures here about, I mean, in general, it's Turkish and Uzbek, Uyghur, and Kazakh. I mean, there's going to be Azeri also tomorrow. Now, everybody dealing with these languages seems to be teachers. I mean, in this group of their particular language. No, I know you're all linguists dealing with languages in general, but then there's people who deal with Kazakh and so on. Anyway, so I think it's useful in the case of Turkic languages because they're so similar. Also for people who are just dealing with Turkic for practical purposes to know these historical connections because, as I said, the languages are regular and everything is transparent. I mean, if you have all these Indo-European languages, it's also terribly complicated. Morphology is complicated and so on, but Turkish is clear, so it really is worth looking at how things happened. The fact is that the time depth is apparently not so, I mean, it's not so far away in the past, like the Indo-Europeans and the Semitic people who were proto-Semitic and proto-Indo-European very, very far in the past. The Proto-Turkic isn't apparently all that far. It may have been in the 5th century before Christ. I am, by the way, happy. I just want to mention I found here that you will hopefully here also deal with less prominent languages like Sakha and Chuvash. Since I'm connecting with things, the Sakha also called Yakut. Now, just to give etymologies, Sakha comes from Yakut. In fact, because the T is the Mongolian plural suffix, the Yakuts change all on unset Y always to S and change all UU to A. For example, the Altun, gold, is called Altan, and the causative suffix tur is tar. So this is a regular development of Sakha is a regular development of Yakut. So the Mongols who met the Yakuts much, much earlier have preserved the earlier names of the Russians have taken from them, and nowadays they call themselves Sakha. So again, sound laws are very easy to deal with. It seems that Proto-Turkic was, yeah, I said sound laws, now I want to say something about Proto-Turkic, it seems that it was spoken about 5th century before Christ, and that has one reason for thinking so is the word for the metal stirrup. The Turks, it seems, became so successful in their exploits, conquering everything from Mongolia to the Volga, because they were the first to use the stirrup, which is the condition for shooting when you're riding, because you can stand in the stirrup and then shoot backwards and things like that. That's only possible with a metal stirrup. That seems to have been the the base for the success of the Turks to conquer all these places. Now, the important point here is, first of all, that they found them and they can date them archaeologically. But another important thing is that the word Üzenge or İzenge in actually Üzengü or İzengü in Old Turkic is found in all Turkic languages without an exception. That means that before the Turks went away and went all the way to Eastern Europe, they already had this word. Now, this word is also found dore in Mongolic, and in fact, I wrote down here the dagur form, which is durenge, which is also very archaic. I mean, it comes from Manchu, but in fact, Manchu has lots of Mongolic loanwords. So, in fact, this is a word which is attested in all Turkic languages. That is one base for dating Proto-Turkic. But there are other reasons also. I will, if I have time, I will come to that. They have to do, perhaps I should say it anyway, with the fact that the earliest cognates between Turkic and Mongolic are all of the type which is found in Chuvash, which is this language here. This is how the Chuvash look, they're all blonde. Because, in fact, of course, people mix with the local population, and the Chuvash appear to have come to this area, which is the Volga-Kama area in Eastern Europe, perhaps in the 4th century, 5th century after Christ, and have mixed with the local populations. That means that they're the present-day Chuvash and their ancestors, the Bulgars, are the first who left the Turkic communality and went west. But before they did that, they gave all their loanwords to the Mongolians, again making this statement. I would say that it seems that the Altaic theory, I think, is not convincing. So I really don't think that the Turkic and Mongolic languages are related. By the way, here in your pamphlet on Sakha, I read Sakha belongs to the Altaic group of languages. I can tell you that 2 weeks ago, I was in a suburb of Moscow, and there was a conference organized by the Sakha, by the Yakut, in some Sakha sanatorium, which is close apparently to the house of Yeltsin. And the Yakut scholars made everybody sign a declaration that I also signed it, and other scholars also signed it, that Yakut is not an Altaic language. So, no, it really is true. It really is true, 2 weeks ago. So, No, the fact is that this sanatorium was about 20 kilometers from Moscow, but at the same time, there was very close to the Kremlin a meeting of the Russian Academy of the Turkic section of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and there they were all pro-Altaists. So in fact the Yakuts were revolting against the decision of the Turkic section of the Russian Academy of Sciences. So that was that sort of thing. But I can just tell you that they wouldn't like what it says here. Now, again, coming back to the words which we just heard, there was this word gök, which is red or green. By the way, I mean red and green. And kökçay is, for example, the green tea, but the word also survives in Turkish as gök, the sky, because the sky is blue. And from my experience with, I mean, it's not only that kök is blue and green in those languages. My experience with Uyghurs is that they really mix blue and green. I mean, they might use blue and green also in English for what I would consider to be different colors with the same term. Now, Turkish has the word kök, which means root, and it has a word gök, which means sky. There's another important difference between kök and gök, and that is that the accusative of kök is kökö, but the accusative of gök is gö. Now, if you take yok, for example, yo, but ok, oku. Again, that's, I mean, this is sort of thing. There is itmek itar, etmek eder in Turkish at the end of first syllables. Some words alternate voiceless and voice consonants. Others don't alternate voiceless and voice consonants. This has a historical explanation again. I'm just trying to present you the historical aspect of things. Proto-Turkic had long vowels. These long vowels are preserved in Sakha, Yakut. For example, here again, I just took this from the next room. This is Atın, John. My name is John. Atın kimne, kimi. Atın kimi, that means, what is your name? The Turkic languages are in two groups. In some, in Uyghur, you ask what's your name with nime. I just heard this yesterday. But in Kyrgyz and in Yakut, you say adın kim. You say, who is your name? So, atın kimi means, what's your name? As it says here. Now, why I am saying this? Because at, name, is written with two A's. There's another word, at, horse, and that has a short vowel. That's why it's at, adım, but at, atım. So, in Yakut, as you can see in this pamphlet, you can see the long vowels, and these same long vowels are preserved in Turkmen. There's a regular correlation between Yakut long vowels and Turkmen long vowels, and also in a language which was discovered by Gerhard Dörfer in the 1960s, which is called Khalach, which is really the most archaic Turkic language, which is spoken in some very poor villages somewhere in the center of Iran, and is really very endangered because these people think that talking Persian is better than talking their funny language. I think the Azeris are also helping them in this way because, of course, Azeri is an important language, and these poor Khalach there in the village would be very much better off if they spoke Azeri or Persian, of course. So this is one other occasion I would take to support people like you, for example. I mean, people who can do field work with these poor Khalaj because it really is an endangered language. And it really is the most archaic Turkic language. Anyway, so what we see is that the vowel length opposition exists in Yakut, as you can see. By the way, bar, it also says, this is a funny text actually, because first of all it says, my name is this, your name is that, and how are you doing? I'm fine. And where are you from? I'm from Indiana. And then where's the bathroom? I mean, this is a useful text. It says where's the bathroom also in the Chuvash one, by the way. But that's important because ubornai, you'll identify this as Russian. Toilet. How do you say toilet in Russian? Okay, anyway, this is a Russian term. And khannabar, yeah, it's called like that in Uyghur. Khanna is like kanda, where, and bar again has a long vowel. I'm just mentioning this because of the long vowels, whereas barmak, the verb varmak in Turkish, has a short vowel. So this is another point where, again, you have long vowels in Yakut. You also have long vowels in Turkmen, but there's an important difference between Yakut and Turkmen. In Turkmen, as in Turkish, after long vowels, you get the voicing of the consonant. So, Turkmen is a Chuvash language. It has the long vowels and the voicing. Turkish has lost the vowel length opposition, but has kept this voicing, which Yakut still has today. So this was just a few points to show that historical aspects can be relevant for rules, because otherwise in Turkish there's no logic at all why ipi keeps its p, but dip, dibi, the bottom of something doesn't. In one case the p remains p, in the other case it changes to b, and the historical explanation is the only one which you have for explaining this synchronic fact. Yeah, I will at this perhaps what I want to do. I mean, one thing I wanted to do, as you can see in this handout, is to give a general survey of Turkic languages. But perhaps I will first, because I think it's more interesting, take one example, one domain of a topic to show how the Turkic languages developed, and that's the negation. As you know, in English there's just this N for negating things, like in not and no and nil, which comes from Latin. In Turkish, as you know, I'm just giving here on the handout, the first line is değil. Then there is yok and yo, I wrote this with accusative. That's the negation of existence. Then there is the verbal negation, me, ma. I also wrote the other ones, maz and madan, because they're not regular. I mean, you don't have an R there, although some languages have created this R. And also in madan, this is not the ablative of a verbal form, so that actually shows that this converb, the negative converb, cannot be straightforwardly explained from madan. And then there's also something which is negative, the suffix "siz", which expresses lack. So in fact, negation in Turkic is divided into all these domains. Now, Proto-Turkic had the word tegül, which has exactly the same meaning as değil. Now, this word tegül survives in the west of the Turkic world. It survives in all the Oghuz languages. It survives only in the western half of the Kipchak languages. So, Tatar has it, and I mean, I will just mention the Kipchak language in a moment, but Kazakh and Kyrgyz, which are also Kipchak, don't have it. And Kashgari actually says, I mean, Kashgari, who is called Kashgari only, is called Mahmud. He's not from Kashgar. He is from Barzgan, which is in present-day Kyrgyzstan, south of the Sutköl. He's only called Kashgari because he belongs to the he was a prince from the eastern branch of the Haqqani aristocracy. Anyway, so I'll call him Mahmud. Mahmud says that the Oghuz use tegül, but he also says that there is some people who called argot who say dar for is not. And he explains, he's a linguist, I mean not very convincing, but he has this attempt. He says that tegül comes from dar ol. Ol is that, and in fact ol is used as copula in Turkic languages, as for example in other languages the copula that is also used. The demonstrative pronoun is also used as copula in a number of languages. Anyway, what he's saying is he's trying to give an etymology for tegül. He says Turks don't use tegül, but the Oghuz do use tegül because Turks are what he thinks are Turks. Now, Proto-Turkic had long yolk. The verbal suffix is ma in all Turkic languages today. One aspect which we have to deal with, which I would always support, is to see how language contact influences the Turkic languages. Now, we would expect places where languages don't have a certain feature to have an influence on the Turkic languages to lose an element. No contact language of any type of Turkic has a verbal suffix for negating the verb, but still all Turkic languages, because it's so useful, so practical, have kept this ma for negating verbs. The maz is also Old Turkic, and then madan is matın in Old Turkic. Now an additional element which Proto-Turkic no doubt had is there was a verb from sıra, like for example karan is a ruler, karan sıramak is to lose one's karan. Öksiremek is to become a what do you call that? Yetim, öksüz, orphan, that's right. So this sire suffix, which existed in Old Turkic, is today exists still only in the Sayan Turkic languages. So that's another negative element which existed in Old Turkic. Now, as I said, tegül in some way or another, it's del, for example, in Turkmen, in some way or other, survived in the west of the Turkic world. Other people use MS. Most other people use MS. What is MS? You must have seen here one of the lectures, the lecture about Uzbek had the aorist with ar and the negative aorist with mas. This is against the rules because, in fact, normally word final Z is retained in Turkic languages, but in fact, for some reason, in this negative aorist suffix, it's turned to S. Now, what is MS? This is the verb to be, which existed in Old Turkic in the form ermek. Old Turkic had a regular verb, regular copula, ermek, not the Turkish ermek, but they had a regular copula which survives, as you know, in Turkish in this imiş, ise, and so on. Before it was e, it was e. So ms is actually the negative aorist of the copula, which doesn't exist anymore in most Turkic languages. I don't think it survives any place as a full verb. But in fact, it's now. Why was this replaced? I think tegül is irregular. Ermez was a regular verb form, so they just replaced an opaque word by a transparent one, which was a negation of the verb to be. So that's one logic, sort of replacing opaque elements with transparent ones. Now the Chuvash, these people here, they have mar instead of ms. They dropped the first vowel, and Chuvash actually changed, or in fact, there is a correspondence between of Z in Turkic languages in general and R in the Chuvash branch. So these people could have two reasons for this element to be mar. One reason is that they changed old Z to R anyway, but in fact, there is some Turkic languages which didn't like the idea of maz being irregular, because in fact it's, I mean, you can see the ma element and then the Z is irregular, so some Turkic languages actually did change the maz to mar to make it like the aorist. I mean, there you have just gelir and gelmer, where you have the me and the r. So that was another regularization, and I think this is one general rule which you have. I mean, there are two conflicting rules actually. One is economy, to make things shorter, and the other one is to make them more regular, more transparent. And if you have these two rules fighting against each other, then you can really reconcile. These are two rules which are important for the Turkic languages. Now, yok became suoch in Yakut for the same reason that Yakut became Sakha. I mean, they really changed all the Y's to S, so it's suoch. The Yakuts, I said, kept the long vowels, but in fact, they changed the long vowels, the low long vowels, to diphthongs, so that's why it is uo. And again, the K phoneme appears as ch under these regular phonetic rules. So in fact, suoch is a regular, is also a proof, a regular correspondent of yok in Turkish, and you can see with this diphthong that it was a long vowel. I also mentioned choch. Choch is in Chakas, because in Chakas all onset Y became ch. Why am I mentioning this? Because they also have chogl for yok, and this ul is that copula. From yok ol they created the word chogl, and this is relevant because it might be that tegül does come from dar. I can just think of one reason why this could have been possible. Some elements at some stage accord with vowel harmony. It could be that in some dialect tegül became harmonious, and then there were two variants, tegül and darul. And I mean, that it originally was Dag'ol, and that it became harmonious because it always is after something, and then the front variant survived. That's one theoretical possibility. I'm not saying it's like that. So we have to see that Proto-Turkic apparently had two different elements, as far as we can judge it, or think of some ad hoc rule for saving this. Chuvash, as I said all Turkic languages preserve the ma suffix, but Chuvash also has an element on. In Chuvash, as in Greek or as in Hebrew, you use a different element for the imperative. An, bar, I mean, don't, instead of don't, they don't use ma, they don't negate the first, second, third person modal forms with in the same way. They use a different word, a different element, different negation, and this again could have come through language contact. The suffix sis is lost in a great number of languages. For example, you don't have it in Uyghur, you don't have it in Siberian languages. You don't say ev sis or something like that. What you can then say is evi yok adam. I mean, possessive suffix and yok. Now, why would they have dropped such a nice thing as sis? Because, in fact, there is a Mongolian, very strong Mongolian substrate in Uyghur, but also very, very strong Mongolian adstrate in all Siberian Turkic languages. And Mongolian has an element ugei, which is something like dil, but it doesn't have the sis suffix. So, under Mongolian influence, all the languages which had strong contact with Mongolic languages had lost this sis element. This is one way to see that really all the, except this problem, which we have, which existed already in Proto-Turkic and which Mahmud was aware of, we can actually derive the whole negative domain from what we can prove to have been Proto-Turkic, because that's the way it can be reconstructed. So you can see that other aspects of grammar also work in the same way. The time which I have, I just want to give a survey of modern Turkic languages. As I said, there are about 40 of them. I have to say because the distinction between language and dialect is fuzzy. What some people would consider dialects are in fact different languages. I'll just mention in short the great difference which there is between Selçuk, Oghuz, and the Turkmen. Selçuk, the person who founded the Selçuk Empire, suddenly decided to become Muslim and managed with his great conquests. But in fact, the original Oghuz stayed in their homeland, which was somewhere in western Uzbekistan of nowadays, and they did not become Muslims until much, much later, and also kept, the Turkmen are the only Oghuz who have the original nomadic life. They have their tribal structure intact. These are the original, the Turkmen are the original Oghuz, if I could say so. But on the other hand, their language is not all that original, because remaining, I mean, the Turks went to the west, so they were separated from the rest of the Turkic world by the Persians in the middle, but the Turkmen got influenced by Chagatai, they got influenced by Kipchak languages, so in fact Turkmen had strong influences from Central Asian languages. So in a sense, that's a big split in the Oghuz languages, with Turkmen keeping very original lifestyle of the Oghuz and some very archaic features. But on the other hand, for example, with all these auxiliary verbs, yat, otur, and so on, changing the whole verbal system, they have adopted that because of the local influence. Now, just one last word I want to say. You speak about Uzbek and you speak about Standard Uzbek, but in fact, the north of Uzbekistan is very, very Kipchak, and the west of Uzbekistan is completely Oghuz. And if you look at the dialects of the west of Uzbekistan, you'll see that they are not like Turkmen, they're neighbors, but they're like Khorasan Turkic, which is in the east of Iran. So in fact, sort of Seljuk dialects are spoken in the east of Uzbekistan, because the Turkmen who came north only in the 14th century or something split the Seljuk Oghuz into two groups. So you can see this division in this Seljuk Oghuz, created secondarily by the Turkmen coming in between, the Turkmen who also came, also in Iran and also in northern Afghanistan. So one thing one has to really distinguish is the Oghuz, which is from the Seljuk Empire, and Turkmen, which is a different language. In the Kipchak languages, they have I will mention the group. There is the Volga-Ural group, which includes also Siberian Tatar, which is a bridge to Siberian languages, as Kyrgyz, which is a Kipchak language, is very much of a bridge to Altaic Turkic. So these groups have sort of limits, in fact, because they're intermediate elements. Altaic Turkic, on the other hand, is a Siberian language, which is rather similar to Kipchak languages. One other point I want to mention is a language called Salir. It's called Salar by other people, but they themselves call themselves Salir, actually. In fact, there's a Salir, Turkmen Salir tribe, and the Salir say they came from the west, and people have discovered relatively recently that they have all sorts of Oghuz elements, but in fact they have very, very many elements which are not Oghuz at all. So I'm not sure that Salers are really Oghuz. How could this happen? Kashgari, the Salgur tribe, which Kashgari mentions, is now part of the Turkmen Confederation, but in fact there must have been a convergence of Turkmen, so the Salir may have left the Turkmen Confederation before the convergence which the Turkmen had. Concerning Ural thing, there's this idea of saying Southeast Turkish, Northeast Turkic, Northwest Turkic, and so on. There's another language again in the Gansu Qinghai area called Yellow Uyghur or Western Uyghur, which has features belonging to the Siberian group. So this areal division doesn't really work because, as I said, some people moved. These people were nomads, so these people moved to China. I think I will just stop here. There are still dialects and Turkic dialects and languages being discovered. Again, I said 2 weeks ago I was in Moscow, so there was one lady telling me that she discovered in Khakassia dialect, which is not at all similar to the other languages of the area. People have been telling me, people in Mongolia, this summer, who discovered really different types of varieties of Turkic. So, in fact, the Turkic world is still open to fieldwork, and this is what last word I want to say, that you can really discover very, very interesting things if you just travel around in this huge Turkic world, which really spans such a huge area. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Questions? Next. About
Bring this to the reception room.
Thank you. This isn't really a question at all. Just to thank you for your talk and also to point out that before my time here at Indiana University, the department used to be called the Department of Ural-Altaic Languages, and then it had to change its name because the faculty renounced the Ural-Altaic hypothesis. So are you?
So this thing here. No, I'm agnostic. I don't know. I'll tell you.
We were ahead of the time, I guess, or Indiana University.
No. I'll tell you one thing. I've written 2 articles. I mean, this is really one thing I really shouldn't tell you. I've written 2 articles this summer, one for the Altaic hypothesis and one against. So.
You think the law?
No, both. No, in fact, I really am agnostic because in some ways it looks. I mean, there's some very archaic features which the languages share, but in fact, in some other ways you can see that there are huge differences. So, in fact, I think that's not a bad thing to write 2 articles like that, because one article, I mean, that really is a challenge, sort of. Yeah. So I'm agnostic.
Thank you for this very interesting talk. So you mentioned how these languages actually come to differ as they do, but you don't really seem to say much about why they're so similar now. So, I mean, splits have happened at some point, so the time depth is actually tiny, it's very small. So that would suggest to me that actually these languages stay quite stable, right? After these splits happen, after these, I don't know, actually, when would you date those major splits in the Turkic?
There's one thing I want to say. I mean, about Kazakh. Kazakh is incredibly, I mean, it's a huge area. It's from China, from inside, there's 1 billion Kazakh in China. And it's all the way to the Volga. And it's incredibly homogeneous. Now, this reminds me of the fact that if you look at Arabic dialects, you have sedentary dialects. Every village has a different dialect, but the nomadic dialects of Arabic are very homogeneous. So nomads move around, and then they have they keep stable because they're all in contact. They're all moving. So this could be one possible explanation that these people were nomads. I mean, you see it in Kazakh, which has a huge area and very small differences. So this is one explanation. One other explanation one might have is about the attractivity. Turkish functions well. I mean, it's an economical language, and I mean, it's this is one other point. Another point again is that Indo-European languages have all the time tended to lose suffixes because they have stress. By the way, that's one question. I mean, you said no stress and so on. Indo-European languages tend to lose suffixes, and then they have to renew categories all the time. There is generations of, I mean, if you look at French, it has morphology, which is a new morphology compared to Latin. They've reconstructed it after they lost all the Latin morphology. But Turkish morphology is stable, perhaps because they don't lose their suffixes.
Even
I mean, this is one question of word accent. They really keep the suffixes.
And even within one language, so from 500 AD,
Yeah.
So 1099, Northern Conquest, and now there have been so many changes in the history of the English language. And after
Yeah.
it was exported to the British Isles, right? So within 1500 years, so many things happened. Great vowel shift, the final vowels got deleted, all of that within one single language. So if you look at Old English, it's very different from modern English now. Yeah. So I mean, so it's striking to me that all these sorts of languages, despite the fact that the split was probably around, I don't know, maybe 100 AD, CE or something?
Before 1 or 2 centuries before that.
Okay. Despite that, they're quite similar.
Yeah.
Right?
There's
And
one
I
other
mean, I
point.
agree with you that vowel harmony and all those regularities probably explain why.
There's one other point I want to make about morphology. Middle Persian and Sogdian and so on had Indo-European complex morphology and so on. Persian lost all that because Persian was the lingua franca of all these Turks and so on. Turks couldn't really, it was difficult for them to learn all that morphology, so they had this lingua franca and dropped the morphology. So Persian became a lingua franca, that's how it was renewed. Latin the same. All these many people had to speak Latin, and then they dropped all that Latin morphology and had analytical systems and then a new morphology. Perhaps Turkish was no lingua franca, I don't know. So that's another point. Lingua francas, which are used by people who have a very different language, tend to lose their morphology. That's another point.
More questions? Yes.
You are settled with Kazakh.
But Professor Kara wanted to say something? He was lifting his hand.
It would be too long.
Okay.
It was very interesting to listen to your presentation, and you mentioned the metal stirrup.
You want to mention?
The metal stirrup, which was the invention of Uzengi.
Stirrup, yeah.
Uzengi. And I think the ancient Mongolic form is probably not Dore, but Dorega or Dorega.
Yeah. Well, the
Yeah,
G is a big question.
G.
G's are not stable, as you know. These G's are not stable. It's not a real G.
But we have proof for that.
Yeah.
And this word could be connected with the Turkic yüzük, which is a ring or a circle.
Yeah,
And we
that's
have also a word döre, which means a ring used for the
yeah.
nose of the beast and the bulls and so on. And my colleague Roland Pasha has a long story about this word. But
Concerning this word,
yeah,
the Mongolic has a D. The Turkic has a Y only in Chuvash. This would be a case. I mean, I'm afraid to say that. I mean, everything looks like it moved from Turkic to Mongolic, but this word it has a possible Mongolic etymology. Uzengi has been connected with uzen above, or with is, because in some languages it's izengi. But I tend to think that this word could have been borrowed from Mongolic to Turkic.
no, I don't think it's a Turkic word, it's of Mongolic origin. I think that the Mongolic word is Turkic origin, but it may be connected to the Turkic word with yüzük, which is a ring. The stirrup is in fact a ring. They're not always metallic. I saw, for instance, archaeological finds where we have a wooden stirrup. That one also okay.
Döre with yüzük.
Yeah, and it could be
Yeah, it's
connected
better.
with this word. And
Okay, so Uzengi would be just
Tomorrow
only
I-
Turkic languages.
tomorrow I will speak about the D. I have a handful of words for that. Now, speaking about the word blue, word. In Mongolian we have this disyllable between köke, which is translated in modern languages, but it also means green. So the grass could be köke for the Mongols.
Look, there was this mention. The word kara was mentioned in one of the lectures. All Turkic languages have kara. All Mongolic languages have kara for black. All Mongolic languages, all Turkic languages. Like your name.
I borrowed it from ConCALL-2.
So there are many things shared by Turkic and Mongolic. It's true.
So, but one more interesting thing that this Mongolian köke may be a very ancient Turkic form, a disyllabic form, so it was not a Mongolian addition, but it was borrowed from the Chuvash type Turkic language. And then in Chuvash we have kavak, which is a regressive assimilation or breaking of the distorted font vowel. And you mentioned this common feature of Yakut and Turkmen, And I also enjoyed the two long vowels when I was at Ashgabat and Antwerp with Gök and Beige for 5 and Dör for 4. It's all the long vowels. And I'd like to mention that there was a Hungarian traveler of Jewish descent, Vambir, Arminus Vambir. And when he traveled, he disguised himself as a dervish through Central Asia, he picked up a so-called Kiva Tatar, a kind of Uzbek. And he took him to Hungary. And this Uzbek fellow worked in the Library of the Hungary Academy of Sciences. And at that time, a German linguist, Goethe, studied his language. And he discovered the identity of this sort of Kiva Tatar long vowels with the opposite Sakha long vowels, which he learned from Goethe's grammar. So that's an interesting story, I think. So probably I will continue tomorrow.
Yeah, concerning the fact is that when you have cognates between Turkic and Mongolic, Mongolic very, very often has one vowel more, and it seems like that original longer form was the Turkic form, and the Turkic languages lost it, and the Mongolic has it. For example, Bağırmak is Barkira in Mongolic, and Barkira in Uyghur comes from Mongolic actually. So in many cases, you have one more vowel in
sometimes it's a
Mongolic.
secondary in Mongolian, and sometimes I think it's a preserved ancient Turkic, second syllable element. And one more, the normal equivalent, semantic equivalent of Beil or Begil or Begil is not Ugay, but Dusu or Bish in Mongolian. And Ugay is the equivalent of Yod. So that's something. Now I will continue tomorrow in my prophecy. Thank you.
Maybe one more question.
My question is,
Yes.
you said that the Kazakh language isn't changed. Does it mean that Kazakh people are stable people?
Yes.
Is that the answer? Okay. I actually have a question which is,
You said it's the other way around because they were nomadic. That's why there was much more
Psychological.
I actually have a relevant kind of related question that involves Kazakh. So the plural marker in many Turkic languages is lar or lar based on vowel harmony. In Kazakh, you have more variance.
Yes.
And it also depends on sonority of the previous coda sonority of the previous consonant and things like that. So when you look at it, it's such a natural language when it comes to like simple when it comes to its syllable structure. And when you look at it, it makes more sense. Maybe that was before other Turkic languages. But then again, if you look at the underlying representation, when you think about the fact that, okay, having just lar and lar would be simpler. Again, I have no knowledge about the history of this thing. So when you look at that, it feels like the Turkish form is probably the older one. Which one? Like, or do we know?
There's another thing. There's also dog and no in Kyrgyz.
Yeah.
Now, all I can say is that there are two groups of Turkic languages. One group which has lots of assimilations, and another group that doesn't. Uyghur, for example, doesn't do these assimilations, although they're further away. Siberian languages, most of them do. They have differences in these assimilations. So, yeah, this is one other point which I can make at this stage. I'll just use this occasion. In Old Turkic, as we have it in the inscriptions, this thing doesn't exist. But Old Turkic is by no means Proto-Turkic, because even the, Kashgari mentions 20 languages, and in fact other Turkic tribes are mentioned in the Oghuz. The Oghuz inscriptions mention the Karduk and the Basmil and the Kyrgesh and other people. So in fact, the inscriptions are one dialect of that time. There were other dialects at the same time, and other dialects could have been like that. Perhaps there was one dialect which also had S instead of sh. Only they didn't write it because they were busy being nomads.
Probably because our language is a main language of Turkic languages.
No, I didn't say that. Although you founded
Because
the
we have everything,
Turkic
that
Academy.
specific sounds.
But,
That's what I was just sort of said.
yeah.
She's quoting me.
No, we just don't, I mean, it's possible because we don't have Proto-Turkic. And I don't have the time, but for example, Egül, which I said was lost, the inscriptions don't have this. They also have MS, so they dropped that as well. So the inscriptions are not Proto-Turkic. That's one important point.
Thank you so much for this interesting talk. So